podcast. So today we have Brett Campton. So he's one of the members here at the Open Mind Space. Also, I've been friends with him for about maybe over 12 years.
2005, I think.
Yeah, from about 2005. So a long time. We've experienced a lot. Both of us been through a fair bit. So we don't have any set questions. It's sort of an open conversation, and it sort of leads itself, really. So,
but there is an intention behind this conversation. So my intention, anyway, is that you guys have life experiences that are very far outside of mine. But in one of the earlier podcasts, Murray, we talked about your experience with addiction, drug use, time in jail, and that's something so far outside of my world because I don't really have anyone in my life that has been that far in. And Brett, you have a pretty similar history. What do you want to share a little bit about your life story, an abbreviated version?
Okay. I guess it started, early in my childhood. Yeah. I had some pretty significant trauma early on in life. I didn't realise at the time that's what it was, but I guess I sought comfort around that, and I tried a bunch of things before I got involved in drugs, like I used to, I used to make up stories about myself and tell people my name was Trent and I come from, Queensland, and just made up radical stuff that was untrue, because my reality and my truth was unbearable at the time. Yeah. So when substances came along, alcohol was the first thing I was introduced to, and it softened that, it took away that discomfort, that distress that just seemed to be on all the time. Like it just seemed to be an enduring kind of part of my life, So when the opportunity came up, it was natural, to take that first drink. And I was at a family Christmas party, and one of the other kids, who was a little bit like me, I guess, had access to the liquor cabinet, and we just wiped ourselves out. We got caught. We did a bunch of dumb stuff. We spray painted a car. I think we were about 7 or 8 at the time, and I just longed for that experience afterwards, And I guess it was a few years later before something else happened. I think I was introduced to cannabis when I was about 12. Yeah, and I started to smoke that while I was away on holidays with the family. I'd exhausted all those other things, telling people stories about myself that weren't true, Trent was my kind of my other identity,
Like Clark to Superman.
Right, exactly. Yeah, except I was hiding something a bit more kind of, I don't know, a bit darker. But I'd be down the street with my parents, in this small holiday town up the coast, and a girl would walk past and say, "Hi, Trent," and I'd be just like, oh, just in the horrors, And I used to wish that I was, that I was adopted and all this stuff. I just never felt comfortable in my life, And so when substances came along, it just made me feel more at ease. I could be what I thought was my real self under the influence of something,
Yeah.
Totally.
I could be Brett, and I could belong to that family, and I could do, it just made life more accessible for me. Yeah. It was inaccessible prior to that, so.
Because that's the running theme with most people who get involved with it, is like this level of discomfort they experience within themselves may not be real, but it's real enough to want to seek relief.
Right.
So we find it.
Yep.
It comes into our lives and we find it and we just go, this is the answer.
Yep.
It's like, finally, I feel like I can fit in. I don't have this heaviness, this anxiety, or this constant chatter of the mind about things that aren't particularly real.
Yeah.
Instantly, this stuff just falls away, and we're able to be a part of this stuff that we feel so disconnected from.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because I can relate to that of like not fitting in or wanting to be someone different or creating different personas, because I think all of us do that to some degree to try and fit in. We offer a different version of ourselves. Where do you feel where does it kind of click and become like an addiction, or takes over? Like, is it there's just the desire so much to not be in that discomfort that it's...
It creates a discomfort of its own, doesn't it? It's like...
I was just about to say, it's like after a certain period of time, then it starts tilting back the other way, right?
Yeah, it's a self-perpetuating problem, you know. So, and once I start to, you know, be that kind of deceitful and that kind of dishonest, that's something else that needs to be comforted. Yeah, because suddenly I'm out of alignment. I'm so far removed from what I know to be true and what's real. Things start to get blurry there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So you start, I don't know if you experience the same as well, Murray, that you start to create these lives that you're not really sure what's real and what's not anymore. Is that...
Well, what was real or perceived to be real was awful. You know, domestic violence, alcoholism, like the stuff that people are exposed to, I guess, in their early lives is traumatic. You know, for a lot of people. I certainly don't think that we're unique. I think it's more common than people, you know, want to recognise. So it's but yeah, it was looking back on it with awareness now. I'm able to see the kind of moving parts of it, you know, the anatomy of what was kind of happening, which is relieving, you know, because I was so bound up, you know. I was just a big knot of that stuff the whole way through my life, you know, and I was doing just reckless, idiotic things without any kind of understanding why, you know. Like, I had no idea what was driving me to do the stuff I was doing, you know.
When did that question come in? So when do you think there was the moment? Because that's a really good point. A lot of us, not just in the addiction or in the reckless world, but we do a lot of behaviours unconsciously. We react in certain ways unconsciously. Where for you did that question come in of, why am I abusing the substances? Why am I... was that a question that came in?
Yeah, it was, I mean, for me, it was always there. Okay. You know, like, I was always like, I don't know why I do this. Like, it's kind of weird. I know it's destructive. It harms me, but I don't know. There wasn't another choice. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It was almost like I didn't have something else to choose from.
Okay.
Yeah, it was there. It was ready. It was accessible. It was in my street. Everyone was doing it. All my neighbours, you know. It wasn't that kind of far out, you know.
I think that's the really good point too. It's like, for people who get involved with it from such an early age, we don't actually learn what other avenues there are. So we attach to this, and it's like, in the fun, it's like very relieving, comforting, all of those things. But over time, then the behaviour of an alcoholic or an addict or someone in that scene starts to kick in, and then what's attached to that behaviour is the remorse, the guilt, the shame, and this continues to feed that cycle. Now we need to, like you said before, we need to comfort that now. So I think it's like that, what you said, it's like this big snowball, and then we become this big ball of whatever it is, and we don't know how to fix it, and it just keeps that momentum, that snowball effect. Right. And I know some of your stories, so I suppose for you, when was the moment, like you've been doing it for some time, what was the defining moment where you choose to have a look at something different?
I think when the consequences just become that unbearable, you know. I'd been back to jail several times. That's never pleasant. That's never a pleasant experience.
No.
But, you know, going back there and like, you know, I really did have bigger kind of ideas for myself. You know, like I kind of always thought more of myself, really. But that's the paradox, you know. Like I thought more of myself, but I didn't think much of myself at the same time. Like, how do you resolve that? You know what I mean? Like, that's a hard thing to, you know, it's a hard thing for a kid to try and wrap their head around. So stuff it. Let's just get wasted and we'll figure it out later.
Yeah, totally.
So Brett, what happened for you? What was like kind of one of the first steps where you started? And I'm sure that there's like steps forward and then steps back and then steps forward and then steps back. And
Yeah.
Leaps forward and leaps backwards.
Right, yeah. I don't really think I ever had a great deal to do with that.
Yeah.
It always seemed to be conditions outside of my control, you know.
Yeah.
So I'd get arrested and I'd be on remand, and then there'd be an opportunity to go to rehab.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, avoid a jail sentence, go to rehab. You know, I don't know how many times I did that. Must be like dozens, literally dozens of times. I did an inventory on how many times I went to treatment. Like, this is like 15 years ago, and it was up to 30 something then.
wow.
You know, so I'd done that circuit a lot. You know? And for some reason I just kept finding myself in the right place. You know, I didn't understand why. Like, people like that were on the same circuit as me, they were all dying. You know, people around me, they're just
Yeah, I witnessed this as well.
dropping left, right, and
Yeah.
centre, and I couldn't figure out why I kept going. You know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just kind of blessed like that, and you know. But there was a part of me that was yearning for something else, and I think that's the part of me that kept me alive. You know what I mean? That at least got me to turn up. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then those treatment centres that I went to exposed me to other things, other kinds of treatment. You know, and the 12-step movement is massive, and it's been a big influence in my life. I've been involved in 12-step recovery since I was a kid, and I was first introduced to it when I was 16, and and it's just always been a beacon of hope for me, you know, because I've seen people there living manageable lives, you know, and I just didn't understand what they were doing different, you know.
Yeah.
And it took some time. Like, I had to have a lot of stuff stripped away from me before I was that kind of ready,
Yeah.
to do that stuff. Because what they're asking is pretty big, you know. Like,
Totally.
you got to be truthful. Like, what? Suddenly now I've got to be truthful? My whole life has been built on a lie,
Yeah.
you know. And now I've got to start telling the truth. Whoa! And that was a massive swing, you know. Like. And something I resisted for so long. Well, I'll do everything else except getting the honest part, you know.
Yeah.
I'll just, you know, I'll make the friendships and I'll do the service, I'll do all that stuff, but I'm not getting honest. I'm not telling you anything about me. I'm not letting you get any closer than this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because my experience of intimacy prior to then was painful. You know what I mean? Like, the people who were meant to love and care for you caused you pain, you know.
And that's the big thing. So I heard you touch on it a little bit earlier, like experiencing that disconnect at a young age, and then coming out of addiction and moving into recovery, then also wanting that distance, like keeping that disconnect.
Yep.
And it's a really tricky phase because you're coming out of a lifetime of where you use substances to soften that connection point. Like, the space in between was blurred and you felt comfortable to engage with people, not on an honest level, but it was some form of connection.
Yep.
So we can't come out of addiction into recovery. Then we're asked, if we move into like a 12-step program, we're asked to do all of these things: be truthful, connect, turn up as ourselves, share our story, work with others, all of this stuff. But we don't have the buffer anymore. Like, we're asked to do all of these things that really are foreign to us without the buffer that was making this stuff really easy. So also, Brett is a drug and alcohol counsellor. So this is a really important thing that I think it'd be nice to like talk about also, because I think it's really nice and important that people that have had an experience can best help someone in the same place.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that's kind of one of the founding principles of the 12-step movement, is that it's one addict or one alcoholic helping another.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think that's vital for us. Like you were mentioning, you know, we've come from this world where we've been so disconnected. We need the antidote, and quick, you
Yep.
know, and that's through familiarity, you know, and that kind of connection that we get with each other. And there aren't many places you get that.
That's right.
You know, where it's there ready for you to
That's right.
arrive into. You
People
know?
are waiting to offer it to you.
Yeah. And you know, Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, they're really big on nurturing newcomers. You know, like they kind of catch you and ease you in. That's the ideal anyway. You know, so it's fundamental.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think, so what I know from my own story, and I've also listening to just TED Talks and stuff like this, and just being through that life and then coming from that life into recovery, where I had to like sort of learn this new way of living, that connection was super important. Building, like, firstly in that nice comfort place where people are ready to offer it to you, but then learning to form that outside of that, like branching out and going in search of the things that fill the voids.
You bet.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any. I don't think there's any movement or any form of treatment that claims to be everything to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like you know, Alcoholics Anonymous, for example, says that it's just but a beginning. You know, for us, and you know, and we're encouraged to go on and continue to seek.
Mm-hmm.
You know, beyond there, that's given us the foundation to kind of operate from. Yeah. And we learn some valuable principles in that as well. That should never be undervalued. You know, we learn truthfulness.
Really solid foundation.
You bet. Open-mindedness.
So so you said that's your foundation, then you go to explore. So I know you've done a bit of exploration. So what are some of the things outside of that, like your own things that have resonated for you that have carried you further in your journey?
Yeah. There's been there's this enduring presence of this particular spiritual book that I avoided for years. Like, it kept popping up, you know. And then Eckhart Tolle started to talk about it and wrote about it in the book, and so for me, I study this Course in Miracles, you know, and it's just something that I've just taken to naturally, you know. But more recently, I mean, that helped correct a lot of my thinking, you know, above and beyond what the steps could do in AA for me. But more recently, you know, like the yoga stuff and the meditation stuff that I get to experience here with you guys, it's been phenomenal. Like, I've seen some phenomenal change in myself here, and I noticed myself a lot less. That's awesome. Like, I was like all I ever thought about. Do you know what I mean? Like, seriously. And I've been around for a while. You know, I've done some work, and I was still all I ever thought about, you know. And I'm much more conscious of that these days, and I'm learning to be more other-centered, which is kind of new for me, you know. The principle of that never made sense to me, you know. Like,
it's a really important point, because I also went through the same process. Like, it got to a point, like, I found yoga also, and for the first time ever, it was funny. Like, I felt so connected to myself, like my physical self, and like this self that existed outside of the mind. And then it was like that spirituality path that also I was always drawn to, but because of the way I was living, it was just like disconnected from it.
Being of service to others is like, it's like a massive gift, you know. Like, I never really, they talk about it in the 12-step fellowships, you know, like about, you know, working with others and tireless work with others, and the best way to treat our, you know, our less than ideal behaviour is through tireless work with other people. You know, we can only keep what we have by giving it away. To an addicted mind, that doesn't make sense.
Exactly,
you know?
right. So we get to this point where it's less about us and more about what we can do for other people.
Yeah.
And I think for myself, and also I've noticed massive change in you over the last couple of years also around this stuff. So it's been less about what you can get to try and fill this void.
Yeah.
And it's like the unraveling. It was like all of a sudden I realised, and I've seen the same thing take place in you, it's like, hold on, if I begin to give more, then like with boundaries, then this void that I've been trying to fill for so long actually disappears.
Yeah.
And I feel so much more comfortable with myself. I feel aligned with what's happening around me. There's not this struggle of like, why do I still feel this way when like look what I'm getting? Like,
yeah, absolutely. And the course that I study talks about this stuff too. Like, giving and receiving can't be separated. Like, one can't exist without the other.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, and that's another one of those paradoxes that are built into this. You know, like, so the selfish thought is to, no, I must keep this to keep this. You know what I mean? But we're taught to kind of give it away to be able to keep it. And the next part of that story is that we actually benefit more from that. Do you know what I mean? From being able to share with that and to, you know, to watch other people change and grow as well.
so much more fulfilling.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, and that old lie that you know, once we're addicted, that's it. You know, leopard can't change his spots and all that stuff. It's no longer true for us.
Well, yeah. So I see that phrase. It's like once an addict, always an addict, and it's funny because I think when I look at it and that phrase, I think they've got it around the wrong way. I think we were born like hypersensitive to what's happening around us, and we're unable to process and deal with it. So then we become the addict or the alcoholic, and that's what we need to unlearn. So and come back to our true nature and find a way. How can I exist within this space the way I am? Maybe super connected, energetically or spiritually, super like sensitive to what's happening around me. How do I operate and live in this space whilst nurturing and honouring who I actually am?
You bet. The thing that I wanted to change about myself the most was like my sensitivity and my which is now like one of my biggest assets. Do you know what I mean? Like I get people and I'm able to be more for people due to that. That actually makes that possible. You know, if I wasn't that kind of sensitive, I wouldn't even know. I wouldn't even know someone was struggling, you know, because I wouldn't be attuned to it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And I watch it, it's like now even like, so we're on the topic of maybe drugs and alcohol, but the holistic view of addiction. And it's now like, because we've been through maybe the severer end of it, now we can see people that are maybe struggling with issues that are away from drug and alcohol, but still have that addictive nature, right?
Life controlling stuff,
yeah,
absolutely, yeah.
So you found this place. It's funny because I remember, like prior to you getting here, there was like this resistance from Brett around trying yoga, and it's like, and I'm never one to like force anything that like my ideas or what I do in my life, that I definitely don't like force it onto people and saying this is the cure. But I know like meditation, number one, meditation for everyone will improve every area of your life almost immediately. Simple as that. Like if you take time out of your day to be able to sit with yourself, have a proper meditation practice, things will get better. But then like the asana, like the physical practice of yoga also. So I remember when you first came here, and it was like, and I remember the comment you made, it's just like, you said, I need to stop resisting this.
Absolutely. Because it wasn't the first time it came up, you know. Like, yoga's been kind of swinging in and out of orbit for a really long time. And I see people that have benefited from it over the years, and I've kind of even found myself deliberately turning away from them because I knew there was something there for me. It just requires effort, you know, and it requires discipline and determination to keep turning up and rocking up on the mat, you know. And I remember when I first started coming here, there was like every day was a battle, you know. And I'd start negotiating with myself before I even left the mat about the next day.
Yeah.
Seriously, like, oh, I've got to come back here tomorrow, you know. And I'd be in my head like, you know, and that became less and less over time because I was determined, you know. And I don't know how I found that determination. I guess, you know, just watching you guys and because this is a really warm, welcoming environment, you know, and the people are friendly here. It kind of turned a lot of the ideas I had about a yoga community on its head, you know, like always thought it was, I don't know, I guess I had some preconceived ideas about it, you know, that it was a little bit, but that's not how I found it to be at all. You know, like I've found it to be really warm, loving and, you know, which is what a guy like me needs more than anything, you know. Like that's the stuff that treats me in my, you know, in my dis-ease. Yeah. Yeah.
So, and it's a really good point for that dis-ease. It's like when we talk about like the disease of addiction or disease itself, and which is anything that makes us feel like that sensation, right? So it doesn't need to be some life-threatening illness to be a disease. It's anything that's happening within or directly around us that makes us feel uneasy.
Yeah.
And looking for pathways to like combat that or like medicate that, right? So like yoga and meditation, like I watch it happen a lot around here. Is like you just, because I spend so much time here and teach a fair few classes here, it's like I see people come for their first time.
Yep.
And then I just watch them, like, and it's like so dear to my heart to watch like the people just grow. Like they just, and like I'm not doing anything.
Yep.
I just turn up and throw a sequence around or whatever, and it's like the people that are turning up are doing the work.
Yeah.
Dead, and it's just amazing to watch it unravel. Like, and like I watched it with you. Like I remember when you first came, you hide up the back in the back corner.
I still kind of do.
Still kind of do. He's got like Brett's spot. This is my spot. But and then I just watched it take place. Like I just watched it go from like a task to like or a grind to something that's super pleasurable for you.
It is. Yeah, a lot of enjoyment coming here, and I think like I neglected to mention too, the battle that was kind of happening was this disagreement between my mind and my body. You know, like I've never experienced agreement between those two things in my whole life. You know, everything physical I've done seemed to be like require effort and like unless it served the other part of me somehow, you know. There was always a battle, you know. Got to get up. Oh, really? Then I go into that, you know, those negotiations. That's when I open my eyes in the morning. Straight away, it's on. You know, got to eat something. Oh, and again, you know, got to get in and have a shower. You know, again, and then throughout the day, that would happen 100 times in a day. You know, here. I've learned how to bring about some unity there, you know, and some peace, and that's just on its own. That would have been worth coming here for,
Well, that's what yoga is, isn't it? It's like the definition of it when these things, the body and the mind and the spirit are no longer separate.
Right. Yeah.
And we find a pathway that brings these things into harmony. So we're no longer in battle. These three parts of ourselves aren't in battle with each other anymore of who's ruling. It's like each part has their place and their role, and they're working together.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in those moments, surely we're all human and things happen, but where those moments where that conflict is happening begins to extend.
Yeah.
We have extended
Absolutely.
extended peace.
And looking back at those earlier years in my life, that like I can see the times where that was shattered and blown apart. You know, like the body, mind, and spirit was sent in all different directions, and
Totally.
you know, so and then the next 30 years was about that coming back together, and it happened here on the floor on the mat. You know, which was. Yeah, it was pretty radical. I could have saved myself a lot of money coming here to begin with, I reckon. A lot of money, a few years in jail. Yeah, salvaged some relationships.
Totally, it's pretty easy, isn't it? It's like, it's like the most simplest pathway to where we want to get to, but it's usually the last thing we'll try.
You bet.
We've got to go through all the other stuff first to make sure this is going to work properly. Yeah.
Well, that resistance, doesn't it, has to get worked out somehow. So, thank God I survived.
Done well.
Yeah, we're grateful to have you.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Brett, for
my pleasure
sharing your story and your knowledge and your experience.
Thanks.
And thank you for being part of our community, because
big part.
What you've received, as you said, receiving and giving are one and the same. You've given so much as well, just by being present and by showing up every day and struggling. Gives other people permission to show up every day and struggle as well. Gives me permission to show up every day. But, I better get in there. Brett's going to be there. I better show up. Got to show up. So you give other people permission as well. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.